everyone, and welcome to another episode of Los Banos Talk. My name is Justin Collins. Tonight, we're going to talk about the recent decision made by the Los Banos Unified School District Board of Trustees regarding the empty vacant seat of District 1. I'm going to give you all the details in just a moment, right after a brief message from our sponsor.
So a lot of people ask what our academy has to offer. First and foremost, we are a martial arts academy. We have a very structured curriculum. Parents always ask me, why should we bring our children here? Like, what can you have to offer us? And, I've been teaching probably since I was 13 years old. And I knew that I always wanted to do martial arts. I solely focus on teaching and trying to be the best mentor and just inspire today's youth through kicking and punching.
And we're back. Thanks for watching. So on March 11th, 2021, the Los Banos Unified School District had their regular monthly meeting, and towards the very end of the meeting, they ultimately made the decision to move forward with an appointment to the seat. And we're going to cut to a clip in just a moment of that board meeting, so you get to see what the representatives said themselves in regards to this, why they suggested it, and what they had to say directly from the source. Now, in regards to this seat, I recently wrote an article about this. Essentially, the seat for District 1 is vacant because the former board trustee, who is Anahai Rodriguez, she resigned in February because she no longer was living in her district. That in and of itself is highly contentious, as there is a lot of information in regards to it, and you can read about it in the recent article that I wrote on LosBanosTalk.com. But essentially, to sum it up, people made public comments arguing that she no longer lived at her residence and hadn't for some time, and argued that she wasn't being forthcoming with her new residency. And then conversely, Anahai Rodriguez has actually reached out to me via Los Banos Talk and has provided me with receipts that show that she did pay the utility bill for water and garbage collection at that residence in question on December 30th. She also sent me her resignation letter, which was read out at that meeting as well. And also, it is attached in the article that I wrote. From her perspective, she feels as though she was the target of politics or local political games and has done nothing wrong. Other individuals would argue differently, saying that she wasn't forthcoming with where she lived. Her side of the story is that this was known and that there was always a plan for her to move out in February and that this was not unusual. She also cited that there was a recent case in where a board member had moved outside of their district, and in that case, there wasn't really a big deal made of it, but she feels as though in her case, there was. Now, regardless, one thing is for sure, and that is that she has, yes, ultimately resigned, and that the seat is vacant. And that left the school board with basically two choices. One was to hold a special election, which was estimated to cost the district about $30,000. The other choice was to go with an appointment. Now, the district actually ultimately decided on going with an appointment, citing primarily the reason being fiscal responsibility and the fact that the remainder of the term for District 1 is relatively short. Now, we're going to cut to a clip of them speaking so you can hear directly from them.
We're going to go on to item H, filling board vacancy. Dr. Marshall.
Okay, it's recommended that the board review and select options relative to the vacant board member position, Area 1.
With this board vacancy, we have two options. And the first option is to make a provisional appointment to finish Annie Rodriguez's term. Our second option that we can choose is to call for a special election. And we've all heard that the cost of this is going to be around $30,000. So I'm going to go ahead and open the floor for discussion and on these two options.
Ray,
Yes.
Earlier, just a couple of moments ago, when we approve the first reading of the new conflict of interest policy. Even though this isn't a conflict of interest, the first line of that policy says the governing board desires to maintain the highest ethical standards and help ensure that the decisions are made in the best interest of the district and the public. And I think, one of our major responsibilities is our fiduciary responsibility to the district and watching how the district funds are spent. And Alejandra shared with us some disappointing numbers in the fact that we are declining enrollment, we are deficit spending. We can't continue on this path. And I think it's prudent for us to go the path that won't cost us anything and save the district $30,000. Spending $30,000 on a special election when that person will be in office for 18, I think the earliest they said we can have that election would be June or July. So we're looking at someone being in office for 17, 18 months. And we're going to spend $30,000 for them to spend in office for, that short a time. Prudently, that is a poor use of our money when we could be saving that and spending that money on things that we need for our students and our staff. So I really believe that we really need to look at the option of doing an appointment which doesn't cost us anything.
I concur. Is there any other comments to this?
I would like to say that I also agree with the option of less expense to the district and or the candidate. It will cost them a decent amount of money to run an office at this point, and the term is short. And to have to rerun in 17, 18 months is a deficit to my pocketbook as well as anybody else. I can't imagine requesting someone to make that commitment and put that kind of cash out for a short amount of time.
Okay.
I think we need to be fiscally responsible.
And I have nothing more to add, but just that I'm in the same line of thinking. There's no reason to do that. So an appointment would be, from my perspective, the best.
I'd like to make a motion that we follow through on doing an appointment for our trustee area that is without a trustee member, area 1.
And I'll second it. Oh.
We all second it.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor by trustee Pereira and a second by trustee Benton to approve and move forward with a provisional appointment. Roll call vote, Tina?
Ms. Benton,
Yes.
Ms. Moran,
Yes.
Mr. Munoz, Mr. Pereira,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
and Mr. Martinez.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, motion to make a provisional appointment has been approved.
Now, as you can see, they essentially decided to go forward with an appointment, and the reasons that they cited were the fact that the time frame that this person would essentially be representing their district would be relatively small, and they would have to run again in the near future in 2022. The other reason that this was decided in this way was because of the fiscal component. This meeting specifically, they had just received a presentation on their finances and the budget. And as board member Anthony Perea mentioned, the numbers were more or less disappointing. Essentially, the school district is going in the opposite direction that we would like it in terms of finances, and is starting to go into deficit spending. As a result, this puts even more pressure on the board to try to do something that would cost less money, and in this case, that would be the appointment. Now, I do not know for certain, but historically speaking, what most likely will happen next is that next meeting, next month's meeting, they will then decide on the process. Next meeting, staff or someone will come up with a couple options or processes in which they would select one and how they're going to do the appointment, interview style, how long, et cetera, et cetera. The appointment process would be a public thing. It would be done at a meeting and individuals would get to see that process. However, individual voters won't really have a say. It will be up to the board as to who they select. So it's less democratic, arguably, but also a lot less expensive. There will be transparency in the sense that the process that they decide will be public information, and I'll let you know what that will be. And that also the meeting itself will be public, like any other board meeting, and you'll get to see that, what the candidates answer, how they answer the questions, etc. So this isn't an entirely like behind closed doors type situation. This is a public decision, and it's not entirely uncommon. Luis Castro, for instance, was also an appointment. In fact, many members of the school board in the last few years have been the results of appointments. Off topic to this discussion, but still kind of relevant. At the same meeting, Los Banos Talk actually came up during the board meeting in regards to the recent videos and articles that I've done regarding the school board. And it's about as awkward as you are probably imagining it was. So we'll cut to that clip now.
And last but not least, I again, this last couple of weeks, received a ton of comments, phone calls, etc., from a number of people in the community and in the school community and in the community of Los Banos about an article or posting, I should say, on Facebook by Los Banos Talk. And, I just want to reiterate what I've said before. We as a board have no jurisdiction over our board members. That is something that is done by the public. We are elected officials. We have no jurisdiction to do any kind of punishment or whatever you want to call it for any of our members. So don't complain the fact that we haven't been able to do anything, because we can't. That's not in our purview. So please be aware that I really appreciate the phone calls and the comments. And that's how I hear about what's going on in the community and how our community feels that our district is proceeding in all of the activities and events that's going on. And so please keep contacting me, and I appreciate that. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Pereira.
There you have it, folks. Los Banos Talk was brought up in the board meeting. There was a awkward, palpable quiet that it brought to the room. But the thing that people sometimes, I think, don't understand is that Los Banos Talk isn't about attacking anyone. It's not about picking some kind of side or going with whatever. All it's about is getting the information to the people that you deserve and need to know. And the things that our elected and public officials do in the meetings and what they do publicly, etc., is important and does matter, and you deserve and need to know it so you can make informed decisions. And I understand that kind of ruffles some feathers, because people really enjoyed the old days of Los Banos, where the only thing covered was local crime and regards to how city council voted or how school board voted or how decisions were made or covering the meetings, etc., really wasn't talked about. I know there's a lot of people that wish we could return to those days, but it's painful. I get it. We don't always like to hear bad news. And honestly, I don't like to report bad news. It's nice when I can actually report good news. I just need good things to happen to report good news. But the big takeaway that you should get from all this, folks, is that at the end of the day, Los Banos Talk is a news media company. It is local journalism, it is local news. But it's not the government, and it has no power to truly hold anyone directly accountable other than providing you information. You and me as voters are what actually have power within our democratic constitutional republic. And so there is no way for board members to hold other board members accountable. And even if there was, why would they hold themselves accountable in such a way? It's kind of like asking the government, hey, police yourself. It just doesn't work and it just doesn't happen. So, some things that you can actually do if you want your voice heard. Yes, this show does make an impact. Yes, things are heard. But there are other steps that you can take as well. If there's something in your local government that you don't like, a couple options you have is one, yes, you can directly email various representatives, etc., and maybe you will influence them. But the thing is any kind of private correspondence like that, they can theoretically ignore it and then it never sees the light of day. They have that choice and that ability. And so long as everything is totally private and through private channels, while it does give them the most opportunity to correct the issue and it is the most respectful, it's also the least likely to really get fixed. It is reasonable. It is important, though, that you be reasonable with people, and it's not a bad practice to give them that opportunity first. Privately reach out to them. I think you'll find that many of the elected officials are actually pretty nice people behind closed doors, and that you can have a decent conversation with them and explain the various things that are important to you, and maybe you'll persuade them. The second thing you can do is you can leave a public comment. You could submit a public comment, and then it would have to be read in at the meeting. And then at that point, maybe it's addressed, maybe it's not. It probably won't be addressed if it's not on the agenda for that evening, but it might show up on a different agenda. And if nothing else, at least it'll always be a matter of public record that this was heard. And from there, media such as myself can pick up on it, just like I have for other stories, and can at least say that this was brought up and that they heard it. At which point, there's no denying that it was publicly said, it was there, they're aware of the issue. And if a lot of people leave a public comment around something specific or something in particular, and it keeps coming up and up, it really sends the signal that, hey, this is something that's really important to the community. But if people don't really hear a public comment regarding something, then it kind of allows them to blow it off and think, well, maybe it's not really that important because it wasn't important enough for someone to write an email or to leave a phone call. And last but not least, the absolute most important thing you can do to influence your local elections is vote. Yes, vote, and then, of course, running for office yourself. Board member Anthony was absolutely right. As elected officials, there's really nothing to hold them accountable. The election in and of itself validates them, their position, and gives them the power and authority from which to act. It acts as a basically mandate from the people, if you will. They've already been elected. And so the only way to really hold them accountable is essentially for them to become unelected. So there's essentially two things that can be done. There can be a recall effort, right? Someone could start a recall. The other thing that someone could do if they dislike a local elected official, etc., is that they could try to get that person voted out of office come when they're up for reelection. The thing to remember, though, with both of these options, which I think is really important to remember, is that you have to have an alternative. And what I mean by that is, yes, you can do a recall, and yes, you can also try to vote someone out of office. But if there's not an opposing candidate, not a viable option, plan B to that candidate, by default, there's really nothing there. You can have a recall, but without a candidate to replace the existing person with, it's worthless. And similarly, it's hard to get someone out of office, but not have someone in there as well. And so, one of the things I want to bring up is the idea of negative politics, which is where people talk about a candidate in a negative way, and they'll say this is a candidate, why they're a bad choice for this position, or this is something they're doing that's bad, et cetera, et cetera. But what also needs to be said is This person over here, though, is a good person for that position because these, and this. This person is going to address these issues. One of the reasons why a lot of our local elected officials, and really all elected officials at all levels, don't really listen to the public sometimes when it comes to suggestions is because they complain, but they offer no solution and they don't tell them what they want. For instance, they'll say, I really don't like this or really don't like that. And then they kind of come off as someone who just really doesn't like or has a problem with everything and is really hard to please. But they never really are able to actually say specifically what they actually want to see happen, what they actually would like to see happen. Now, I know it seems kind of unfair to say, well, it's not like you're an elected official. It's not like you should really have to come up with the ideas. It is acceptable for you to just simply say you don't like something, and you shouldn't have to bring up some kind of alternative. Absolutely true. And I agree with that. But on the same token, if you really want to get your voice heard, what you need to do is with your criticism or with your list of things that you dislike, it should also be coupled with a list of potential solutions, things to look into, or areas you'd like. Generally speaking, when elected officials hear, I don't like this plan, but here's a nice viable solution that would be better, or have you considered this or that? They can either directly answer why that's not viable or tell you they've already looked into it, or they could tell you that they are looking into it and that's interesting, or they might tell you they've never thought of it and that they're going to bring it up. So just so you know, it's important to not just criticize and say this is wrong, wrong, wrong. It's also good to try to offer up some kind of suggestion in its place so that way there's something for that person to actually take action on. If you haven't already, please like, follow, subscribe to Los Banos Talk. We have Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, and of course losbanostalk.com. You can subscribe to the free newsletter at losbanostalk.com and have articles sent directly to your email address. You can become a supporter of Los Banos Talk for just $4.99 a month. With your contribution, you help support local independent journalism, and you'll get access to behind the scenes information and all the videos ad-free and first. Once again, my name is Justin Collins, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.